in and out of the Beltway. From large cities to small towns to the rural heartland. From sea to shining sea. This is Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio. Inside the News.
Welcome to this week's edition of Inside the News. We have got a busy show for you, a very sobering show as well. Let's say hi to the guys. Ben Brunson, how you doing on this day?
I'm doing great, surviving the August heat in Florida. It has been hot the last couple of weeks, but looking forward to September.
All right. And Frank, how are you doing on this Tuesday?
Another stormy day in New York and a summer of storms. I guess the prediction that the global warming would prevent us from having adequate water didn't work out. Or was that the time back in the 80s when they said we were going to freeze and everything was going to be too cold? Well, it's hard to keep track of what the latest global warming myth is.
Yeah, it sure is. Okay, Frank, let's start with you. Well, just here within the last 24 hours, Donald Trump was indicted on number 4. This is down in Georgia. And it wasn't just a simple, let's have a few counts of indictment and Trump going to enter the courtroom. But on the 25th of August, he's to report as well as 18 other people, including Giuliani, Mark Meadows, Sidney Powell, Jenna Ellis, just amongst some of the people that are there. And in addition, there's a RICO statute. And the word that they're going to keep on ringing clear to everyone is racketeering, racketeering, racketeering. And yet we are talking about Biden Inc. It's no surprise because we talk about Biden Inc. and basically that was Crime Inc. And that goes back to Al Capone because that was what happened in the 30s. They're going to try and make Trump the bad guy with racketeering. Frank, go.
Yeah, Fani Williams, the prosecutor, has issued a 98-page indictment. Among the charges are the RICO charge. Know what RICO stands for? Racketeering, influence, and corrupt organization. The corrupt organization is the one I'd like to focus on for just a second, because the gist of what the Biden administration and the Democrats have been doing over the years is trying to criminalize political opposition to progressive policies. And that's exactly what the basis of most of these charges are. Interestingly enough, if you read them carefully, one of the things they talk about is not deeds that Trump did in all these cases. In many cases, it's what Trump or his lawyers thought to do or speculated about doing. So we're criminalizing thought. You know, if you ever walk down the street and you see some guy running a stoplight and you'd say, I'd like to wring his neck for going past that stoplight. Well, according to Fani Williams and the Democrats, that's something that they can prosecute at some point because you thought a dirty thought about what they were doing. There's very little there in the indictment. Unfortunately, though, the purpose of these indictments is to simply get in the papers and to hurt Trump's chances in the primary and then the election. It's something that we're seeing nationwide, but understand two central problems that it presents to the country as a whole. One is the criminalization of political opposition, the use of thought as opposed to deed, and the other is the concept of lawfare, which is the use of bogus charges, essentially, to hurt whoever your opponent is, whether that's a rival store, a rival enterprise, or a rival politician. There we are.
It's thought, but there's no act, there was no crime against anybody. There was no harm done. And that's quite interesting. It's thought. And the only one I thought that you really had to repent to on thought was God because of the 10 commandments and, those evil thoughts. And so then you end up going to confession on weekends on those thoughts. I did not know it was go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, this administration is also attacking religion too. So I guess they have to replace God with the federal government. If you're a Catholic, you're a second-class citizen in this country now. If you're Jewish, you're facing an administration that is anti-Semitic. So we are really having a big issue with that.
Yes, we sure are. Okay, Ben, if you're still with us, let you weigh in on this.
His last name is Willis, but we'll just call her Fani on this show. We have a crime against the Constitution that's occurring in Fulton County, Georgia right now. And I'm holding my breath, waiting to hear when Stacey Abrams gets similar charges filed against her for. I think the phrase was that Trump went outside of the prescribed process to challenge the election in Georgia, and therefore is guilty of these RICO violations under Georgia state law. So given that we had 4 years of Stacey Abrams claiming to be governor of Georgia when she's not, I assume she's guilty of hundreds and hundreds of felony counts at this point. This is ridiculous. It just goes down with all the rest of these charges, all of which will result in convictions, given the makeup of the jury that Trump and his co-defendants will face. And it will take either a pardon from Trump as president or someone other Republican as president, or a Supreme Court reversal, which will happen for any convictions that come out of this, because it's just unconstitutional, a restraint of free speech. I'm starting to wonder. It seems to me, just listening to some of the legal pundits, that all of these trials, there's a good chance of pushing them past the election. I think Trump's going to be the nominee. I frankly, at this point, would almost like to say that I'd like to see all the other Republican candidates just step out of the race in protest of what's going on against Donald Trump. I think in either event, he's going to be the nominee of the Republican Party. And I think he's going to have a good chance of winning in November. I have no idea who the nominee of the Democratic Party will be, because I'm pretty sure it won't be Joseph R. Biden. But we'll see. And if Trump wins, I'm sure his first day in office will be pardoning all his co-defendants, and we'll have the constitutional exercise and what happens when a president pardons himself. That'll be interesting. I'm sure it will lead to an impeachment if the Democrats control the House.
Frank, let me ask you a question on pardoning, because some people say that New York and Georgia, those are state charges, although it seems like in New York, those are some of the federal crimes that they brought into that, and down in Georgia, that these are state charges and all. And can a president actually pardon someone in a state, or how does that work there, Frank?
It's my understanding that a president can't pardon someone for a state offense. It's for a federal offense.
Okay, so now continuing on this here, Frank, let's keep on going here. Remember that Strzok, and we go back to the communist thing there. I say communist, I should have said the Russian thing, but they said we have an insurance plan to make sure that he doesn't run. Is this an insurance plan that they had 4 different prosecutions in 4 different areas?
Well, I think that the overall concept was that they would do everything, one, to get Trump out of office once he was in, and to prevent him from getting reelected. So I guess if you want to put that under the entire rubric of an insurance plan, yeah, I suppose that works. The problem with all of this, of course, is what I described before as lawfare. If you have 2 candy stores next to each other, and one of them happens to have a nephew who's a good lawyer and just wants to harass his opponent so that candy store number 1 can get all the business, keeps piling lawsuits on him, even though they're nonsense, even though he'll lose eventually, but the other guy has to pay more for his legal fees than you do. That's lawfare. That's simply misusing the law. You can call it abuse of process or malicious prosecution. Those are 2 charges that are used within the law when you bring a nonsense lawsuit. I'm waiting for the Trump team to start using some of those concepts against the various prosecutors and understand something about the mentality of the prosecutors we're talking about. Let's look at New York under Letitia James, the Attorney General of the state of New York, who brought charges against Trump. She campaigned for office on the pledge to, quote, get Donald Trump. Now, when you have someone running for what should be a nonpartisan office, and the focus of your campaign is getting someone on your political opponent's side, in my book, that makes you ineligible to run that office in the first place. You should not be a prosecutor or an attorney general or a district attorney who ran for office on the pledge of getting someone in the other party for what really looks like political charges. That's what we're facing in New York, Georgia, pretty much across the country where we see any of these charges being brought up.
Okay, Ben Brunson, I put in there the Constitution is crying and that the country's in a bad place. This country, we've never seen anything like this. And the country for the next 18 months or so, or 16 months, whatever it is really going to be through the ringer. That we're going to be facing a lot of things we've never thought before, and the country's going to have to deal with it, and people on both sides are going to get quite angry.
Well, the problem, the core problem here is we've got an oligarch class in this country. And if you're tied in with, particularly in the Democratic Party, but there are some Republicans getting wealthy too. There's so much money passing through Washington, D.C. There's so much influence. The tax code is so valuable in terms of paying lobbyists to insert, to work to insert tax changes and benefits into our, our tax code, which is thousands of pages long, that it's corrupted the entire process through Washington. You have one outsider come along who wants to take on and try to slay that dragon. His name is Donald Trump, and the whole corrupt organization, the real corrupt organization, which is Washington, D.C., the deep state, has gone to war. They waged an insurgency against Donald Trump from the moment he came down the escalator 6 years ago. And it's ongoing and continues. And of course, just to clarify, when I was talking about pardons earlier, that's for the federal crimes. The president can't pardon these state charges. And in fact, Governor Kemp of Georgia is highly limited in his ability to pardon people facing state charges. Apparently, under the Georgia Constitution, you have to be convicted first and serve your time, and then you can be considered for pardon after the fact. So it's a particularly onerous situation as far as that's concerned. I think the redress there will be ultimately to the U.S. Supreme Court. So it's thorough corruption. When Peter Strzok talked about his insurance policy, I don't think even he realized the extent of the corrupt organization that's behind him and how ongoing this would be. This ongoing insurgency against one man, one candidate, Donald Trump, and if he's wins presidency, it will be ongoing for the 4-year presidency during his first. And it just highlights and magnifies how crucial it is that either Donald Trump or someone like him take on the attempt to rein this in. And we'll talk about later the FBI's ongoing role. A central figure in all of these issues is the FBI. The FBI is thoroughly corrupted. It is just a horrendous organization at this point. And no matter where you look, you always come back to the FBI's involvement in trying to cover up and benefit one side and attack the other. And we know which sides are which.
Okay, Frank, let's just look at what happened in 2000. Al Gore, he challenged the election. He had a bunch of lawyers, and he says, well, I believe I won fairly, and Bush did not win. Hillary Clinton is the one that we remember the most because she was challenging it. She couldn't believe that Donald Trump won, and yet no indictments on either side. And when Barack Obama said fundamentally change America, he's going to have Americans back and forth against each other. Hillary Clinton really is fueling the fire with this false thing of what happened with Russia, collusion gate, if you want to call it that. And now everything is just really ramping up. Frank, America's in a bad place right now.
Well, it certainly is. And of course, the concept of prosecuting you for challenging what is clearly an unusual election is something that should be protected by the First Amendment to the Constitution. But along with the Second Amendment to the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment right to privacy, the Sixth Amendment right to counsel, and the Ninth and 10th Amendments to the Constitution, which talk about those powers not given to the feds belong to the people or the states, it's being tossed out the window. We've got to see this for what this really is. This isn't just against Donald Trump. This isn't just about the 2020 election. This is an attempt to silence the Bill of Rights straight down the line. We're looking at something totally unusual in American history. You brought up about Al Gore. There was a challenge. It didn't work out for Al Gore, but no one prosecuted Al Gore for challenging it. He took his best shot, and that was it. The court decided. Interesting sidebar. During the Al Gore challenge, the Chinese government believed that America was about to break out in civil war. They didn't understand the concept that we are a nation of laws, a Bill of Rights, a constitution. Their people in the embassy in Washington, D.C., actually were telling the government back in Beijing that prepare for an American civil war. Turns out, though, they might have been right, but not about the Al Gore election, but about the 2020 and now the 2024 election, because that's exactly what we're heading into. Consider what we're looking at. If, in fact, Donald Trump, if any of these prosecutions succeed, and Donald Trump is campaigning from a jail cell, or if he even gets elected and the Democrats move to, say, impeach him before he even takes office, you're going to have at least 55% of the country who's not going to accept that at all. We're looking at perhaps not firing on Fort Sumter, but certainly a symbolic way of doing that, where Americans simply believe there is no legitimacy to the federal government headed by a Democrat who was elected because Donald Trump was incarcerated during the campaign.
Oh, I think we need the James gang with some rope, and they have to pull out the jail cells and those things back in the Wild West, and they had the dynamite to blow them, and we're going to blast them out. This is almost like that, and you hate to say it, kind of joke about it, but we're in a bad place. We've got a whole lot more to come. We're going to talk about the assassination of that person fighting crime down in South America and the world markets. And Ben knows a lot about the markets, what's going on, devaluation. We got China, Russia, Argentina. We've not talked about Argentina in a lot. I can't remember when we talked about Argentina. We'll be back.
You're listening to Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News.